All right, well, good morning again. We're still waiting on one person. There are 9 people in this class, okay, just so you're aware of that. And as you can see, we're trying as best we can to socially distance. Now, Mr. Corrigan, who teaches next door, he's a big believer in seating charts. I'm not. If you want, I can make one out. All right, people tend to just, be comfortable in a seat and they stay there. I don't have a problem with that. I know what he does is if he has people who are loud or whatever, he'll move them around occasionally. All right, I guess all that I'll ask is unless you really have a problem with where you're sitting, you sit where you are. All right, if you've got a problem with your vision or whatever and you need to come closer, we're waiting on Dominic. I just had him right there. All right, but he's the only one that we're waiting on according to my list here. So I'm going to take about 15 minutes and I'm going to go over the syllabus with you. We're supposedly at 8:45. They said around. We're going to have a Microsoft Teams meeting. All right, and I should get a link or some kind of a notification, hopefully, on that. And then I will stop talking and we'll listen. So I want to, during that time, as much as possible, I want to go over the syllabus with you. I sent you an updated syllabus this morning, literally right before class, and there's just one section that's different, and it's basically the attendance thing for in here. So I'll go over that with you in just a couple minutes. So the class it's AWD. AWD is an acronym for Application and Website Development. That's the program that you are now in. AWD1000, as you can see, the name of the class is Web Development Technologies. Some of you were talking at the beginning of class and you have some experience either with programming or with website design or maybe both. If you have experience, great. If you don't, that's also great. It's not a problem one way or the other. All right. Ideally, by the end of this week, you're already going to have written your first website. And there's a very good chance not only will we write it, we'll deploy it out to the internet. So you'll be able to go out and show people what you've done if you want to. Now, it's not going to be anything where you're going to say, well, I can quit now because I can get a job. That's not going to happen after a week. All right, but it'll be something at least that you can start taking some pride in, and it's something that we'll build upon as the semester goes on. I mentioned to a couple of you at the beginning of the morning, I need these, unfortunately. But and I talked to my wife. I guess I went through the whole summer and didn't try the mask thing with my glasses on that much. So she's going out trying to get me some anti-fog spray, but the place that she wants to get it from is not open till 10. So hopefully it'll be better, but right now it's very interesting. So we start promptly at 8:05 every day, Monday through Friday. We're done every day at 11:55. What you're going to see or probably hear happen is there's a class that comes in here right after us, so it's at 12:05. They tend to be loud, all right? And I don't say that to be mean. They're just sitting there talking and whatever. But we said we wanted to keep the doors open because then that's one less thing you have to touch. So the plan is to keep those doors open. And if it gets too loud, I'll say something if I have to. But they'll be wanting to come in here as much as you'll probably be wanting to leave. All right, just so you know. So we will meet, our last day is something like the 17th or 18th of December. So it's 80 days. The first semester is kind of a drag in that we meet all this week, all next week, then we're off 2 weeks from today. That's Labor Day, September 7th. Then we're off not until November 11th. This school recognizes Veterans Day. And you are literally, it's a school holiday, you're off. And then 2 weeks after that, you'll be off Thursday and Friday for Thanksgiving. And that's it as far as days off for the semester. Now, in the spring semester, it's nicer because you're off for Martin Luther King Day. There's a week in there for the spring break, etc. All right, so it works out a little bit differently. All right, we're in this room. This is T. We're the Taylor building. That's what the T is for. We're T203. That's T201. If you are planning on being, and hopefully you all are, a full-time student in the program, this is the classroom that you'll meet in the whole first year. All right? This room, T203, at this time. In the second year, we go into the room right next door. And in the first year, you're here in the morning, 8:05 till 11:55. In the second year, you're there in the afternoon. it's 12:35 to 4:25. The reason for that is I'm the only instructor in the program. So I've got first-year people in the morning, second-year people in the afternoon. Okay? All right. My name is Jeff Scott, as it says right there. That's my office phone. Literally, other than lunch, I'm never in there. So if you want to get a hold of me, just email me. All right? That's by far, that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. All right? Just so you know, I don't mind telling you this. If for some reason, you know, you're like, you're not answering. I also have a Charter account, and it's the same thing, except it's jpscott@charter.net. I don't know why you need to use that, but if for some reason you're getting kicked out or for whatever, it's not going through okay on Rankins. It doesn't happen very often, but if it does, just you can try me on Charter. That's fine. Our offices, a couple things logistically, just so you know, if you don't know it, when you get out, if you leave here and you make a left and you make an immediate right, that's where the bathrooms are. Again, they're trying to socially distance in there. There literally are two, for guys, there are two stand-up, two sit-down, but one of the stand-ups is closed. In fact, I think there is only one stand-up in there. But one of the sit-downs is closed. They only want two people in there at one time. The reason I'm telling you that is historically, I go for about 50 to 55 minutes and then give you like a 10-minute break. I have no problem still doing that, but there might be a line out there. And again, you are asked to socially distance, you know, and I know people are like, well, I don't want to sit in the classroom here, I'll never get in there. If it's the middle of class and you've got to go to the bathroom for any reason, I don't even care if it's to wash your hands, just do it. You're not hurting my feelings any or anything else. All right, that's not a problem. All right. Now, and also below that, right below where the bathrooms and stuff are down there, that's where the lounge is. If you don't know, there's the food service on here are vending machines. All right, so, okay, here's the program level outcomes. So this says that anybody going through this program, the AWD program, these are the 4 things that you should get. Basically, in this class, it's all about number 1. I'm not going to read it to you. You can all read. Besides that, with the fog on these things, it'd be really hard to read it. But this is a class. We're going to start with HTML, which is hypertext markup language, and we're going to go into CSS, which is cascading style sheets. From there, we'll jump in and we'll talk about something called Bootstrap, which is a framework, and don't worry if you've never heard these terms, it's no problem. So there's 2 books for the class. They're both by Muroc. The first one is Muroc's HTML5 CSS3 4th edition, and the other one is JavaScript jQuery 3rd edition. You don't need the JavaScript book until about halfway into the semester. All right, you're welcome to bring it. I mean, that's your call. But this one you're probably going to want because we've got assignments out of there, and I'll be using that as I go through the lectures, etc. All right.
Do you recommend we get print version or ebook version?
I don't make recommendations just because some people are real comfortable with an ebook version and some are not.
Okay.
All right, so it's really whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
All right, so that's the information on the course. Again, I'm not going to read this to you, but the idea is you learn basic web development technologies in here, and that's the name of the course. So again, I'm starting as though you know little to nothing, and that's fine. It's really not a problem whatsoever. In fact, what I'm thinking I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to show you this right away, and if I'm turning any of you off, sorry about that, but sometimes when I tell people I like country music, they're like, oh, brother. But one of my favorite artists is a guy named Travis Tritt. All right, and this is his website. All right, what we're going to actually start doing this week is we're going to rewrite that website. All right, and no, I mean, you can literally go through here and you can right mouse click on the site, choose view page source, and this is all the stuff that, all the HTML, the JavaScript, etc., and don't worry about any of it. We're not going to use that. We're going to rewrite it. We're going to put some stuff that's not in his site. Why? Because I'm trying to tailor this around what we go through with the class here. You're not going to have to turn this in. This is for you so you can start understanding how a website goes together, etc. All right? All right, these are the 5 or 6 outcomes from this course. So again, you're going to be able to write good, compliant HTML5 and CSS3. That's the newest HTML. That's the newest CSS. You're going to be able to use CSS3 with Bootstrap. So in other words, you're going to learn how to make things fade in, fade out, do simple animations, etc. A bunch of stuff like that. All right. You will create websites. We will link, for example, with the Travis Tritt one, we will link to YouTube videos, all right, and stuff like that. It's really and truly not difficult to do. So we'll do that. All right, we'll make a form. He does not have a form on his, but we will make a form to say basically like if you want to join his fan club or whatever, but we'll set up a form. So you've got that in there. All right. Then in really going into the second part of the class, that's where we'll do more programming. HTML is not a programming language, just so you know. So, you know, because I heard a couple of you talking, you know, how much programming have you had, etc. It's a markup language. All right. And in fact, a lot of the stuff that we do, I'm going to show you, I'm going to have you do some of it. And then I'm going to say, hey, you know what you just did? You'll go, yeah. And I'll say, now hit this one key, and it'll write everything we just did for you. But I want you to do it first because you have to understand what it's all about. All right. We'll also go through something called the Document Object Model, or the DOM. That's probably, if you can master that, then basically what that means is you can take anything on a web page and do anything you want with it, regardless of what it is. It's a picture, if it's text, whatever. And we're going to go through that. All right. Hopefully, you know, and you see you got the link in here. I'm not going to go to the Rankin handbook, but if there's ever any issues, I'll tell you, Mr. Corrigan right next door there, he's the department chair. And if there's a problem with the way that you're dressed or your hair or whatever, he'll hit you on it before I will. All right. It's expected that every day that you're going to shave. Now, that's probably not that big a thing this semester with these. All right. And you can have a beard, but it's supposed to be a decently tapered beard. All right. This is what they put in here as far as what's new with the attendance. And I'm not going to read it to you, but I will tell you this. I am required to take attendance every day. Now, it used to be that the class starts at 8:05. If you came in after 8:05, even if it was 8:06, I had to mark you tardy. They're not doing that anymore because, again, there could be a line out there. There could be anything. The tardies have pretty much gone away. Now, if you do walk in here at 11:49 and class ends at 11:55, you're absent. All right. Well, I got here with 6 minutes left. No, that's not how it works. All right. But I try to be, I'm probably a little more lenient than like Mr. Corrigan is, but he's been here 30 years. All right. So the maximum number of absences for this course, this is wrong. It's actually 6. You get one more than the number of days a week the course meets. That makes sense? We meet 5 days a week, so you get 6. Now what happens is after you get your 4th absence, if that happens to you, there's a little form that I have you sign. And it just says, hey, Angie, you've missed 4 times, just so you know. And she says, yeah, I know. So I sign it, she signs it, and then I take it back. If she misses again, then I say, Angie, you missed the 5th time. You got to take it to Mr. Corrigan. He's got to sign it. And he'll sit you down and talk to you for about a minute. And he'll say, you know, you only have one more of these. You know, and then if you miss again, you got to go over to the other building and have Patrick or Brandon sign it. If you miss more than that, and so your 7th miss, technically you're removed from the class. Now you can go fight that, and you should, if something happens, especially. All right. I mean, I had a student who came in here a couple years ago. He literally got into a car accident on the way here, and his leg was shattered. You know, he was gone for 6 weeks, and they ended up giving him a medical withdrawal. All right. And if you get sick with COVID, and especially if it's really bad, let me know right away. And if you do need to, they'll give you a medical withdrawal for that also. All right. So it says you won't be dismissed for medical reasons, but again, you can request a medical withdrawal. All right. You're not expected to cheat. Hopefully that just makes sense. You will have 2 types of tests in here. All right. There will be written tests. And when I hand you out a written test, you get a week to finish it. I just literally give it to you. They say, here, you got a week to finish this. Now, if you decide you want to get a study group or whatever, you can do that. That's not a problem. You want to do it by yourself? That's not a problem. They're due a week from when they're handed out. All right? And we also have what are called HOTS, or hands-on tests. Those you're expected to do yourself. We'll talk more about that after we have this meeting, this Zoom meeting that we're supposedly having very soon. The grading, A, B plus B, C plus C. Technically, even though it shows it on there, you don't get Ds. If your grade is a D, as far as in Rankin standards, you failed the course. Just so you know. I mean, because I know sometimes that surprises people, and they'll say, well, I had a D in high school and I still passed. That's not the way it works here. So you have to have a minimum of a 74.5 to pass. Okay? This says this is how much time you're supposed to spend. This is just a standard thing. I don't even put it out there. Inside Rankin, okay, you always go out there. Historically, I've been here now, I'm starting my 5th year. Usually once or twice a year, we have like an ice day where you get an ice storm, and they tend to cancel class that day. All right? And if it's, we had 2 days last year, they were both in the afternoon where we had bad snowstorms, and they canceled the afternoon classes. Always go out to Inside Rankin. They don't let radio stations know if they're closing. They don't let TV stations know if they're closing. That's just the way they do things here. All right? Tutorial information, we'll talk more about that later. But if you need a tour or whatever, basically go to Patrick for all this. If you've got a disability, it'd be nice if you let me know about it, especially if it affects you in some way for testing or whatever. Career services, everything's there. The snow days I went over with you already. And the rest of this, I'm not going to go through it now because it just goes through a day-by-day thing. What I've not done a real good job of in the past, I'm going to try to do a better job of starting this year. Every day when you come in here, I'm going to say, yesterday we did this. Today we're doing this. Then at the end of class, I'm going to say, today we did this. Tomorrow we're going to do this. All right? Some teachers, this thing is written in stone. In other words, you don't change from it no matter what. I'm not one of those teachers. All right? In fact, my hope is we get quite a bit done this week already. And don't let that bother you. All right? You're going to have at least one day this week where you're going to have a majority, if not almost the entire class period, to just sit and work on homework. And you will have that every week. All right? Any questions on anything that I've said so far? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this for now, and I'm going to show you what's on that flash drive. So this afternoon, the class that I've got in the afternoon, it's a 3rd semester class, okay? And in that class, what you guys are learning in here is how to write websites, and it's called client side. So in other words, you're writing stuff, and there's no hardware type of interaction, etc. In the 3rd semester, you do some of that. So the reason I'm telling you that is the people in the afternoon class, the first thing we're going to do in there is we're going to review the stuff that we learned in here. All right? So why am I telling you that? Because if you look right here, I've got this folder that's called Reviews. And I've created some PowerPoint presentations. I'm not going to go over them, but on HTML, HTML forms, etc. So if you want to take a look at that, again, you're able to. All right? I don't try to force anything down anybody's throat. Sometimes people like to learn that way. Sometimes they don't like to learn that way. What I don't like doing, though, is I don't like to put up PowerPoints and sit and read them to you. All right? You're going to find I'm not going to do that. Okay. All right. I've got a bunch of PDFs I've already found for you guys. And they're free. You know, you can just sit there and take a look at them. And you can see there's a bunch of stuff in here. I'm not going to go through any of those. And as it says, cheat sheets. We're going to be, basically there's going to be 3 different things you're going to have to do, and what I'd like everybody to do by the, hopefully by the end of the period today. If you don't have a computer with you, of course, you're not going to be able to do that. And we're going to install 2 packages, all right, and we're going to set you up with a GitHub account, okay? So we're going to, the packages we're going to install are VS Code, Visual Studio Code, Git, and then set you up with a GitHub account. Why? It'll make more sense as we go through it. It's easier to show it to you while we're doing it. All right? So there's some stuff in there, some cheat sheets and some other stuff, as you can see. What they started doing at St. Louis last year, I didn't do it, but I am going to start doing it this year, and of course for some reason it's not showing here, is I'm going to be using a tool that's called Github Classroom. And what does that mean? That means that what you're going to have once you set up your GitHub account and the like is every single thing that you do for this program, every homework you do, every lab you do, every test you take will be on there. So if a future employer wants to see what you've done, you can point them out to your repository and it'll literally have everything that you've done on there. All right? And they're thinking that's a better way of doing it, and it's more, for lack of better words, kind of time tested. So if I say something is due and it's due a week from today, boom, I can go look a week from today and start grading it. All right? All right, couple other things just to show you this real quickly here. And again, no, you don't have to write this down. You're getting all this stuff. But if you look on here, sometimes people say to me, okay, I have absolutely no idea. I'm brand new. You know, I have no idea what you're talking about, etc. And I'd really like to learn a little bit more, or maybe even learn on my own. There's a really good site that's called W3 Schools. W3 is www, World Wide Web. All right, it's the World Wide Web Consortium. And W3 Schools has got tutorials on really, really good topics that are in this area. So if I just go out here to w3schools.com, what you'll notice, for instance, there's a jQuery tutorial. Here is an HTML tutorial, a CSS tutorial, a JavaScript tutorial, etc. And what's nice about these is, for instance, you know, we're going to start with HTML. So they go through something. You can see all the different, you know, stuff. These are each like about a web page. So it shows you this stuff. It shows you these are all the things that we're going to be doing. Then it's got to do it yourself. And you click in there, and you can change anything you want. So it says this is a heading. You know, this is my stuff. And I run it. Boom. You can see how it changed. All right. And they actually encourage you to use their code. So if you ever run into any problems with anything, it's not cheating to go in there and do that. All right. So like I said, what I'm most concerned with, and if you have your computer with you right now, somebody asked this morning, just so you know, it's expected you're using your own computers. All right. I know there are computers here, but these computers are set up for the hardware program. All right. In fact, historically, a lot of times what they'll do is they literally rip these computers apart and put them back together again. All right. The only day that that typically these computers are used in this program are once a year. We have the students come in from Lewis and Clark, and that's in the spring. They come in here for a day, and then we set it up so they can use these computers, because they wouldn't be expected to come in from high school and bring their own computers in. All right. But if you've got your computer with you, please, all right, please get in, log on, etc. And what I'd like you to do, and I'll go through all the steps with you, is I'd like you to go out to, I think it's VS, let's see, no, okay. All right, it's code.visualstudio.com. We want Visual Studio Code. What this is it is an editor. All right? And it's a really powerful editor. It's almost what's referred to as an IDE, or an integrated development environment. All right? And if you go out to code.visualstudio.com/download, all right, you're going to, am I right in assuming, I'm asking here, does everybody in this room have a Windows machine? Is there anybody with a Mac in here? Or Apple machine, or a Linux box? Okay, because we went through that last semester, and I really don't want to this semester if I can help it. All right, so what you're going to want to do then, once you go out to code.visualstudio.com/download, is you're going to want to go over to here. And I would recommend the installer, it really shouldn't matter which one of these you use. The user installer should be fine. My guess is you all have a 64-bit machine. If you're not sure if you've got a 64-bit machine or not, I know at least on my machine, I think you can probably do the same. That I think you can type in like this what is it? This PC. And if you type that in, it goes there, and if under this PC, if you go out to your properties, it'll show, if you look right here, system type. And it says that mine is a 64-bit operating system. All right. If you bought your computer within the last 5 years, the chances are probably about 99% that it's a 64-bit machine. All right. So what you can do then, like I said, is go out there, go to, you could just click right here where it says Windows. Okay, and it says thanks for downloading. Boom, it's got the executable right there. All right. And again, yours, I don't know where your downloads go. Mine naturally go in my downloads folder. Usually that's predicated based on the type of browser you're using. Sometimes you could save them right to the desktop. Sometimes they go into your downloads. It really and truly doesn't matter. But mine's in my downloads, so I'm going to right mouse click on this and say open. And that just means that when it actually loads, it should open up. All right. In fact, I've got it on my system already, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of it and download it again so I can run through everything with you. So you don't have to do what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to my control panel. I'm going to find Visual Studio Code. Well, I thought I had it. Maybe I don't even have it. But it's funny because it's coming up. This is Visual Studio, and that's two different things. So that's fine. So I'll do the same thing then. I'm going to right mouse click on it and choose open. It may take a couple seconds, but eventually you should get something that looks like what you see on the screen here.
Are you joining us?
I will right now then. Okay. Okay, we're stopping. All right, so granted that was a little screwed up that we started to do a download and then stopped, but just so I can run through it with you if you haven't had a chance to do so. Here was the Visual Studio Code. It should have eventually come up like this. You just click on Run. You may be asked whether or not you have administrator rights on your computer or not. Of course, just say yes. You have to accept this. You can print it out if you want. Go to Next, and I'm just going to take all the defaults, except I like a desktop icon. You may or may not care. So click there, Next, Install. That's literally all there is to it. All right, it's almost non-Microsoft-like in that it's a Microsoft product, but it's easy to use. All right. And it looks like it's installing right over what I had. I don't really care. That's totally fine. This is the little icon that you're going to see for it right here. It's blue. The reason I'm telling you this is next semester for the C# class, that's the one for Visual Studio. This is Visual Studio Code. You can see they virtually look identical, except the one for VS Code is blue, and the one for Visual Studio itself that we'll use next semester is purple. All right, what's the difference? You can do a lot of things in regular Visual Studio that you can't do in Visual Studio Code that we're going to use because we don't need them. All right. So then finish. It's going to come up and it's going to look like this. I'm not going to be going through a lot of this stuff today. Eventually we'll go through it. I don't need to see these versions and stuff. This is something I've got open for another class, but what you may have is like a welcome window that comes, and if it comes, you can just close it, but it's going to look like this. All right, so this is the editor that we are going to use. All right. The other thing I'd like you to do right now, if you would please, even I want you to do it, even though I know you've got it on there, the version that we used last year, they said they recommend that you download the new one. Okay, so I'm going to go and look in my, I'm going to look here first in mine to see if I have it, and if I do, I'm going to try to remove it. So the other one we're going to do, and I want everybody, if you would please right now, I think I know what it is, but I'm going to put this in here anyway. I'd like you to go out, I'll show you this if you can't read that. I know it's a little small. Make that nice and big. Maybe too big. But you can go out to there. You don't need the https://. I think it probably will work just fine if you just put this in there. Git dash, that's a hyphen, scm.com/downloads. We are now going to download Git. Git's a software versioning system. We'll talk about it, just not right now. All right. In fact, I'm going to try to do this myself. I'm just going to, exactly what I just showed you, git-scm.com/downloads. I'm going to go through the whole process with you. I'm going to put it in here. It should come up and look like this. Again, I asked you, you said you're all using Windows. It's easiest to just literally click right here where they show it. You can click on here also. It's basically going to bring you to the same place, but download 2.28.0 for Windows. And it's going through the same thing where it's putting it in my downloads folder over here. And I'm again going to right mouse click on this and tell it to open. Okay, and it should come up and look like this. All right, and I'm going to click run. Notice this time I was asked, it says, do I have administrator rights to do this? Yes, I do. Most of the stuff that's in here, I believe all of it, we're going to choose the defaults, but there's a couple things I just wanted to mention to you. So I'm going to click next. All right. I would recommend that you actually use the default right here as far as where to store this, which is under your program files for most people. All right. You don't have to change it. It'll find a default area, and that's where you should have most of your programs installed. All right. So again, I'm going to click next, and it says it already exists. Well, that's because when I just removed it, I didn't remove everything. So it says, would I like to install it anyway? Yes. Now, when you look here, this is important, okay? Please make sure at a minimum your screen looks like mine. And what's really important is we want Git Bash and Git GUI right there. They should all be, yours should look like this by default. All right? And if it doesn't, you should be able to go in there and just check or uncheck whatever needs to be checked or unchecked. All right? So once you get there, click next. And it says it's going to create a program shortcut. That's fine. I'm going to click. If you don't want it, you know, a start menu folder, I guess you click there. But I'm just going to click next again. And it's got a few things in here. And it says, what do you want to use for your default editor? Well, this is kind of screwy in that, yes, you can click down the down arrow here. And we can choose VS Visual Studio Code. You can do that. But technically, so what did I do? I clicked right here. There's a down arrow right here. And I chose third down, use Visual Studio Code. You can do that, but technically, we're not going to be using these two products together. And if that makes no sense to you, it will in just a couple days. So you can change it, but you really and truly don't even have to if you don't want to. All right? So click next again. And now there's a bunch of stuff in here. The recommendation on here is that you just take the default. It says Git from the command line and also third-party software. We're going to look at some third-party software, not today. All right? So just this probably have the middle one chosen. Just click next again. use the OpenSSL library. We'll go over all that stuff eventually. Click Next again. And this is a little confusing if you've never heard this before. LF means line feed. CRLF means carriage return line feed. What will happen occasionally when you use Git is you'll get these warnings that will come up and saying that they're changing your LFs to CRLFs. We don't care. All right, so we can click Next again. And this is all older stuff. Do you want to use basically the default terminal? It's fine. So click Next again. All right, and it says, what do we want? The default is fine. Click Next again. All right, and this is new because this wasn't on there when I did it last time. It says which credential manager. Again, just choose the default, which in my case at least is the middle one. I'm clicking Next again. And this has got to do with caching. We'll get into caching at a later time. So click Next again. And we don't have to enable any experimental stuff. If you do that, basically what you're doing is you're giving them permission that some of the stuff that you do, they'll be able to retrieve some data from it. So as they're going and as they're working on the product and they come up with new builds and stuff for it, they use the information that they gather from people to see what's working and what's not working. All right, so then just click Install. Literally, it's one of those things that'll take about 30 seconds. I suppose if you've got a slower machine, it might take a little longer than that. What you will notice here, there's a couple things I wanted to say. One thing that came up when Shannon was talking, and I'll mention that in a minute. But in case you didn't know this, and you may not like this, I don't like this, the network that we're on is St. Louis's network. So if St. Louis goes down, we go down. Okay? And that might be fair, that might not be fair, but that's a decision that's made way above my pay grade. All right? So the reason I'm telling you that is occasionally weird stuff might happen. And what I mean by weird stuff is you might come in and there's no internet. They're working on it. They've got a very good help desk here. They really and truly do. And if the internet wasn't working for you and you email the help desk, which is just helpdesk@rankin.edu, and you said, hey, the internet's down, they're going to come back and say, we already know that. We're working on it. All right, I can tell you. All right, it already went down once this morning. All right, and then it came back up again. So it says I'm done. I don't need to view the release notes, and I don't need to launch it. So I'm just going to click Next. That's it. All right, now to tell whether or not these two things work, because we did two different installs. So let's see if we can tell whether or not these work. There's different ways. One way you can tell, if you look on your screen, up on the screen here, and hopefully you've all got the button that's here in your bottom left-hand corner. All right, if you click that, you get an alphabetized list of what's in here. So if I go down, it might not even show Git. That's not a big thing. But I believe it shows, if you go down towards the bottom, I believe it shows Visual Studio Code. See, I've got a bunch of older versions. But there's Visual Studio. There's Visual Studio Code right there. If I click on there, there it is. All right. Now, you don't have to bring it up that way. If you do not have, down on the bottom here on your taskbar, if you do not have an icon for it and you want one, you can just open this folder, right mouse click on here, and choose, there should be a pin to taskbar here, or a pin to start. Mine says unpin because it's already there. But if you do it, it should say pin to start menu or pin to taskbar. All right? What you may have or may not have, depending on how you set yours up, is up on your screen, on your main screen here. Notice I've also got an icon right here. It says Visual Studio Code. You can always start it that way by double-clicking on it. All right? Or, like I said, you can come down to the bottom here and click on it. We're not going to do anything right now with Visual Studio Code, but we will be using it a lot. All right? Now, The other thing that we loaded here, was we loaded Git. Again, Git is a software versioning system. Hopefully this will work. We may have to create a folder, but I don't think you do. Go out onto your desktop, all right, and just right mouse click and tell me when you right mouse click. You may have different things than I do, but do you have a Git GUI here and a Git GUI here and a Git bash here? If you've got those, it was loaded successfully. All right. Now we are going to load one more product not right now though, but there's a third-party software you can use with Git that we're going to load tomorrow. I just don't want to go through it right now because we're a lot later than I thought we were going to be today. All right. Now the other thing that you have to do, and all of you here have to do it except Angie because she did it last semester. And I'm going to show you something, and if I already have an account there, then that's cool. All right, and that is, I'd like you to all please, to go out on the internet here and go out to GitHub, GITHUB.com. Again, if you've already got a GitHub account, that's cool. But if you don't, you're going to have to, yours is not going to look anything like mine because I already have a GitHub account. All right? And what's going to eventually happen as we go out here is you're going to end up saving almost all of your work out to here. All right? And it's a little bit of a learning curve. It's not bad. All right? But as you go through it, there should be a thing someplace at the top that will ask you to create an account. All right? What we ask here at Rankin is when you create an account, make it simple. Like try using your own name, for example. And like mine is JP Scott because that's my login. Mine is JP Scott Rankin. All right? And if you want to do that, if you've already got a GitHub account, you don't have to do this. Now, what we have loaded so far, just so you know, we loaded Visual Studio Code. That's an editor. That's going to allow us to create files, delete files, manipulate files, and it'll allow us to actually run files. So that's the first thing that we did. Then we just did a couple minutes ago, we just did Git. And that's called a software versioning system. Now I'm asking you to pull and make an account on GitHub. What GitHub will allow you to do is to save all your work out in the cloud. So if for instance, let's say you came in here and you forgot your computer, but I was able to get you one, you were able to borrow that. You'll be able to get into your stuff on GitHub from it. Okay? And if you have problems going through and setting this up, let me know. All right? And again, I didn't want to remove mine because I probably got about 50 or 60 things out there, and I really didn't want to remove that and put all that stuff someplace and then recreate another account, etc. All right? But we do ask that when you do this, try to keep your names on here professional. All right? In other words, they don't want... I worked at another college before I came here. And one of the instructors, he got an email from one of his students, and her email was literally, it was sexyblondechick1993@gmail.com, which of course he opened up at home and left it there, and his wife saw it, and wasn't real thrilled about it. And he didn't like it really either, so they made at the school I was working at, they then made it a policy literally about a week later, you had to use your email from the college. That's how it is here. That's what they want you to do. All right. One thing, too, that I did not mention before, because people sometimes ask, sometimes they don't care, but either way, I'm just going to quickly show this to you, and that is one of the things that Shannon mentioned when she talked about here when there was work ethic grades. You get 2 grades each semester. An A, B, C, D, or F, and then either an EE, an ME, does not meet, and needs improvement. So this is exceeds expectations. I'm not going to lie to you, I don't give a lot of those out. All right? Now, how do you get one? Let's say that, well, I want one. Okay. Then I'm sitting there, it's a lab day, and I'm walking around helping people. And you notice the person next to you looks totally lost. So you volunteer on your own to go over there and give them some help. That kind of thing. So that's going over and above what you have to do. All right? Then the next one is meets expectations. And that's what most people get, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You come here every day, you show up, you do the work, etc. Okay? This one is NI needs improvement. I ended up giving out a couple of those last year. Why? People stopped coming. All right? Or when we went to online, they came very infrequently. They didn't turn homework in, etc. And this last one is does not meet. I have never given one of those in 4+ years here, just so you know. But I've given some of these. You get 4 of these. I have to do this 4 times a semester, once every 20 days. I think you only get 1 grade, and I think they average the 4. So if it's the first beginning of the semester and you're not doing something, and you get a needs improvement, that you might end up getting an EE after that. You just shoot up. All right. But just so you know, you will get 2 grades, and I'm supposed to always remind you of that. I typically forget to remind you of it. And it's interesting, Shannon does a very thorough job. I'm sorry we had the problem with the machines, but she's unbelievably thorough. Good news for you guys is you got an hour and a half of that. We had 3.5 hours of that on Thursday. And that's basically what we did, was that. All right. So, it's 11 o'clock, and let me show you the way that I'm going to go through this, okay? Let's see. First of all, did anybody have any problems with any of the installs? Oh, that's great. All right. Now, the question got asked to me earlier, should I buy an online or a PDF of the book, or should I buy a hard copy? Again, that's your call. Whatever you think is best, whatever works the best for you. I have this. All right, crud. Okay, let's see. I don't want that book. I want the other one. There we go. So I've got the equivalent of a PDF for each book, plus I've got the hard copies. But what I want to do right now is talk to you about what's actually in the book. All right. Right now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time and go over Chapter 1. Okay? And as you guess, if you look through here, there are 20 chapters in the book. Okay? The idea is we go through this book in the first half of the semester and the other book in the second half of the semester. Now, that said, we don't go through these last 2 chapters, just so you know, because that's what the other book is about. All right? But it's a very good introduction, so if there's time, I might go through a period and do a quick intro. We'll see. All right? We also, chapters 17 and 18, I'm actually going to go through those this week. Not today, but this week. You won't be tested on them. There'll be no homework on them. But it's just got a couple of things that I do want to mention in each chapter. So the crux of the class for this part are chapters 1 through 16. All right? And what I plan on doing today is going over chapter 1. All right? Tomorrow, chapter 2. Wednesday, chapter 3. Thursday, chapter 4. Now, we're not going to keep going that fast. But most of the stuff in chapters 1 and 2 are theoretical in nature. It's not really until we get into chapter 3 that we've got stuff in there that's going to, for lack of better words, kind of matter. All right? Also, when you get in here tomorrow, this is going to be a little different from what I told you before. You are going to get, each one of you, some hard copies of stuff from me, because you will have written tests for every chapter that we go through in here from 1 to 16. The tests will be given, like, for instance, the one that's given tomorrow will be due a week from tomorrow. The one that's given Wednesday will be due a week from Wednesday. So what I'm going to ask is that with each one of you, when you get it, the first thing you do is put your name on it, and then right underneath it, you put due, and you put that date on it. That you actually will give me. Now, do I really look through those? I mean, I grade all of them, and I grade them fairly quickly. Each one of them is worth 100 points, but the idea is all the information's in the book. They're all going to be multiple choice tests, and they're anywhere from 10 questions to 20 or 25 questions. All right? If you like, don't sit there and say, Jeff, I spent 5 hours on this frickin' question and I couldn't get it. If that's the case, just come and ask. All right? And I'll try to remember to do that, like on Fridays or whatever, say, hey, you've got this due next week, or the day before, we'll go over it. Is there any problem that people have had? All right? Now, if there's 8 of you in here and there's 10 questions on the test, it's not going to work if each one of you asks me a different question. All right? But if there's a question or two, I understand. Occasionally the wording's kind of funky, or you can't find it in the book or whatever, so I will be happy to work with you on that. So this first chapter, as it says, look at the first section, Essential Concepts and Skills. So Chapter 1 is an intro to web development. Chapter 2 is how to code, test, and validate a web page. We'll create one tomorrow, and it'll be unbelievably simple. All right, and I'll show you some stuff that you should put in it. And then I'll show you how you can take that and automate that process. But by tomorrow, what we will do is we'll take that web page, and it won't be much. It might just say hello or whatever. That doesn't matter. But we will run it through what's called the validator to make sure that the code that we write is valid code. All right? All right. Then we actually get into Chapter 3, which is how to write HTML. All right? Chapters, as you can see, 4, 5, and 6 are CSS. And if I'm not an artist, but if you kind of look at it, that if I make a stool, and that stool has 3 legs on it, okay? And you've got one stool is HTML, one stool is CSS, and one stool is Java, or I shouldn't say leg. One leg is HTML, one leg is CSS, and one leg is JavaScript. HTML is the content that you put on the web page. All right. Then you take the CSS, and that's the aesthetics, that's the styling that you do of the content. So if you decide, hey, I made a big header up here using HTML, but I want that to be orange, you put in a CSS rule to make it orange. All right? Then typically JavaScript is for interactivity. All right? So if maybe you've gone out to a website where they've got like, it says you are the 55th person to visit this site. All right? Where they've got like a page counter. That's interactive. All right? Or what we'll do fairly quickly is we'll do things like put the date and the time on it. All right, and things like that, just so you see how to use this. All right, that's going to be on the programmatic side, and again, that won't be till we get into the other book. All right. Then, when you look in here, when we get to chapters 7 and 8, how to work with lists, links, and navigation menus, that's more HTML. So this is all HTML and CSS. All right. Then chapter 8 is responsive web design. If you've ever gone out to a website and you looked at it and it looks good, whether you're looking at it on your computer, on a tablet, on a phone, that's a website that's responsive. It adapts to whatever you're using to look at. You'll learn how to build those. All right? And then we'll go into it in more depth and breadth of coverage, and you'll notice there's only 2 chapters here. And we'll talk about 2 CSS features that are designed to make your life easier. That's the good news. The bad news is they're kind of a bear to learn. All right? The good news is once you learn them, they make your life a lot easier. And this is called Flexbox, and this is called CSS Grid. And we'll talk about both of them. Okay? Then we jump into As it says, more CSS skills that you'll need to use. How to add images, icons, etc. How to add tables. How to add forms, audio and video. And like I said, we're going to start working on a site as a class. We will incorporate all of this stuff. But I don't want to sit there and throw stuff at you until we've discussed it in the book. You know, it's like this week, we're not going to sit there and build a site where we're going to put in stuff from Chapter 16. That would be, you know, that wouldn't be fair to you, so I'm not going to do that. All right? And then 17 and 18, like I said, we'll actually discuss those this week. So it's going to sound, as we start going through this, you might think at the beginning, oh my God, we're finished with week 1. This book's got 18 chapters, and we went through 6 of them already. 1 to 4, and then 17 and 18. Well, I already told you 17 and 18. Basically, they don't have, you know, we're not going to do anything. No tests, no homework, no nothing. All right, we're just going over that for completeness. And 1 and 2, there's really not going to be anything to test you on, etc. on those. The stuff that you're going to have to be you know, concerned with is in 3 and 4. So with that said, I'm just going to jump into Chapter 1. So again, as it says, it introduces you to some basic concepts and terms. It's what a lot of books do in the first chapter. All right? Now, I will mention that in here, they're using a different editor in the book. Look at Visual Studio Code. We'll start using it already this week. If you decide later, I don't like this editor, there's other ones. There's Brackets, there's Atom. There's a bunch of other ones. There's Notepad++, etc. And if you want to use something else, you can. All right? Visual Studio Code to me is not only about the easiest to use, but you'll see that we're going to add some what are called extensions to it by just clicking a button or two to make our life real easy. All right? But again, if you don't agree with that, then don't do it. All right. So they come in here, and this is kind of an interesting picture, because when I showed this kind of picture a couple years ago, it looked just like this, except you didn't have the words tablet and smartphone in there. Everything that you saw on there said desktop or it said laptop. You may or may not be aware of this, you may or may not care, but as of about the middle of 2015, more people now go out to the internet using tablets and smartphones than do using desktops and laptops. In fact, there are a lot of articles you can read out there that say desktops are dead. All right. That said, you may totally not agree with that. Okay. I had a desktop for years at my house, and when that went, I would get another one. But now I've got this laptop here, and I've got another laptop in the office where I got to transfer all this stuff onto it. But the idea is too that when most people call this the internet, you look at that as being the cloud. All right. When people talk about what is the cloud, all right, it's just, where is it? Well, it's someplace that's storing stuff. I don't know where it is. All right. They go through the architecture. This is all interesting stuff. This is not a hardware program. This is a software program. Okay. But they talk in here about things like WANs and LANs. For instance, every single computer in this room is hooked up. They're hooked up to each other, and they're hooked up to the things back there. That's a local area network where the stuff is in physical proximity to one another. There's also connections between here and St. Louis. Well, that's about 45 miles away to the St. Louis campus. They're not going to run cords underneath I-70. You know, that would make sense even if they could do it. So that's a wide area network where there is not, you know, it's not physically located with one another, but it's hooked up in other ways. And they talk about that in here. That's totally fine. You can read that on your own if you have an interest. All right. What we're going to do more than anything in this class is we are creating static web pages. We don't really bring in the dynamicity until we get into JavaScript. Static web pages mean that each time you open up the page, it looks exactly the same as it did the time before you opened it up. all right, unless you open it up in an editor and make a change to it, all right? So there's a couple words in here that you have to at least start getting familiar with, and one is an acronym, and it's HTTP. You know that if you've ever looked, and for example here, if I go to here, and I'm grabbing this URL that I have, and I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, and I'm going to just bring it up in Notepad. And you'll notice when I do that, it's got HTTPS. The HTTP part is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And a Hypertext Transfer Protocol is what's called a request response architecture. And if you say, I don't know what that is, of course you do. If you walked in here today and I said, and I didn't know you, and I said, hi, what's your name? I'm requesting your name. And if you say, it's Angie, you're giving me a response. Well, HTTP is the request response architecture you do to be able to bring up files from the internet. All right? Now, so what about the S? The S in most websites today, geez, not every website today, but most websites today have the S on the end. The S means secure. It's an extra layer of security that's been put in. That doesn't mean because yours says HTTPS, that doesn't mean that it's totally 100% secure. At the school I used to work at, I had a friend there, one of my better friends. He taught computer security. And a woman came in one day and she said, Mr. Tabbitt, I just bought a new computer and I'm really worried about security. So what do I do to make sure it stays safe? And he said, don't ever turn it on. You know, and she was like, that really isn't funny. And he said, well, you asked me how you can make sure it stays safe. And then she said, well, I got to turn it on. He said, okay, don't ever go out to the internet. And she goes, that's why I bought it. And he said, then you can never be 100% sure that it's 100% safe. You may have heard about this years ago because my kids got hit with that. That this was, I don't know, now 5-10 years ago, whatever it was. There was some picture of Beyonce that people were passing around on the internet. And if you clicked on it, it had a virus in it. All right? All of them got hit. Of course, all on my machines. All right? But the point is, you put this in, let's just say right there, bookshelf.vitalsource.com. All right? What is that? That's a URL. That's a Uniform Resource Locator. Okay? And what has to happen is that has to be sent over the internet to a server someplace. That server doesn't understand those words. All right? It's got a number. For instance, the number of your machine, what you're going to notice tomorrow probably already, is when you're using your own machine, it's 127.0.0.1. It's what's called your IP or your Internet Protocol address. All right? So the bottom line is this. When we're talking about this right here, with a static web page, well, I thought they had a picture, but I guess they don't. Oh, there it is. You go out, just like I just showed you. We're the client. We made an HTTP request. It went out to a server that gave us back an HTTP response. All right? That HTTP response that we're going to get returned is returned in HTML or Hypertext Markup Language. You're going to start writing that already tomorrow. Now, that's fine, but unless you've got a website that has your company's brochure on it and that brochure never changes, you want some dynamicity in your web page. All right, if you're going to sell something, for example, you need something like that. All right, imagine that you went out to Amazon and all you could do was look at stuff and you couldn't buy anything. All right, geez, I don't know how Bezos would be able to do it if he didn't make another $1 million or $1 billion. All right, so you come in there and look at the difference now. Typically, there's more architecture involved. Typically, the web server itself can't answer your request. Typically, the web server has got to pass it off to another server and maybe even to another server. All right? And eventually, it still comes back as an HTTP response. But the dynamicness, okay, as it says, it's generated by a server-side programmer script it means that you're able to do something where there's some kind of interaction. All right? All right. Now they come in here and they talk about some of the popular web browsers. I'm going to recommend, if you don't have it, that you download Chrome. Now, if you say, well, I don't have Chrome, I got Firefox, fine, then use Firefox. It's not a problem. All right? You go, well, I don't have that, I use Internet Explorer. Well, shame on you. All right? Because really, you shouldn't. If you're going to do that, at a minimum, you should have Edge, which was pretty much Microsoft's replacement for Internet Explorer. All right? There are other ones. If you on your phone, if you've got an iPhone, you probably have Safari on there. All right? There's Opera, which is basically a text browser, and some people use that. But Chrome, not only is Chrome nice, but what you're going to notice when we start using it, and you have it in Firefox too, and probably in Edge. But if you look on the keys on the top of your keyboard, if I hit the F12 key, all right, I bring up what's called the Chrome developer tools, and you're going to learn how to use those too. All right. Here are some major languages. I'm not going to go through any of these. Again, next semester you'll take a C# class. All right, everybody in here except Angie, because she's already taken it. So she will take a class that goes through Java and Android. All right. So how does JavaScript fit into this? I've told you some of it already. You know, the interactivity. Here's an example of an image swap. Maybe you've done this. Maybe you've gone out to a site and you've looked, for example, let's say you go out to like a Nutrisystem.com or something like that. They've got before and after pictures of people. Sometimes what happens is they show you the before, you take your mouse and you put it over it, and it flips to the after picture. You get out again, it goes back to the before. That's an image swap. You're going to learn how to do that. It's not really very difficult. A little bit of code, depending on how intricate it's going to be. But doing it itself isn't really hard. So again, where it says where JavaScript fits into this picture, well, notice now the HTTP response can include HTML and it can include JavaScript. But again, it's the whole idea with interactivity. We will create a form. It won't be for a few weeks, but when we do, we'll validate the form. What does that mean? That means that if it says that a field is required and you leave that field off, the program won't work. If it asks for a phone number, and maybe it'll ask for a phone number in a certain format, if you don't put it in that format, it won't work. That's data validation. All right, so here's where it starts. An introduction to HTML and CSS. Now, I'm going to show you this, and it may make sense, it may not make sense to you. And don't worry about memorizing this stuff. Oh, that's nice. Did it just go off, or was it off earlier? Well, I've told Charles. He knows. He gave me a new cord. You saw how well that worked. All right. When we start to write these, we're going to put in this stuff. We're not going to, this doesn't matter. But we're going to start to write HTML. So let me just show you this. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to do a file, new file right here. And I'm going to put in, for example, doc type HTML. What is that? That says that we're using HTML. All right. This is what's called a document type statement. The newest version of HTML, and it's not that new anymore, it's about 10 or 15 years old, is HTML5. Before this, for your document type statement, you had to type a lot more in. Now they've made it a lot nicer. All right. Now I could sit there and start typing in a bunch of this stuff that I just showed you. All right. I could type it all in, or I can show you. And I was going to wait, but I'll show it to you now. There's a little shortcut. This is one reason it's kind of nice to use something like Visual Studio Code. I'm going to put in an exclamation point, and I'm going to hit the tab key. Of course, make me a liar. So what am I? Oh, I think I might have to save it first as an HTML file. I didn't think I did, but it might have to. All right, so I'm just going to say hello.html. All right, let's see now if it works. There we go. All right, so it filled in, it created a template here for me. It put in the doc type statement. This is the only one that can be in either uppercase or lowercase. Everything else you do should be in lowercase, just so you know that. All right. This says we're using HTML. HTML is what's called a tag-based language. Here's the beginning HTML tag. Down at the very bottom is the ending HTML tag. This also put in here, this is called an attribute. Come on, stop that. And it says that the language that we're going to use for this is English. You can leave it out because it defaults to English otherwise, but it's considered good practice to put it in. Then we have what's called, right here, this is called, surprisingly enough, the head section. That's stuff that does not appear on the page itself. All right, it's information that either the search engine needs or it could appear up here as a tab or whatever. So what do we have here? This says Meta Char Set UTF-8. And again, who cares? It says basically, for lack of better words, we're using the Unicode Character Set. Why do we care? Because the Unicode Character Set holds over 100,000 characters. It's got not only English, but virtually every other language there is. Before we did this, we used what was called the ASCII character set. So instead of having over 100,000 characters, we had 255. All right, so it made kind of a quantum leap. All right, the first 255 of Unicode are the old ASCII character set. All right, so it still supports all that stuff. This right here, this thing that you see there, that's all one tag in blue. Okay? And that's what's called the viewport tag. And what it means is we want the way that this shows on screen, the content, in other words, we want it to depend and make it as wide as you possibly can based on the width of what we're using to look at it. And by default, scale it to 1.0, which is 100%. All right, we'll talk about how you can change that and stuff later. Then this thing that says title, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but if I go out here and I go here, see these things right here? Everybody see that? Those are favicons there, but they have the title with them. So if I, save that title as whatever, hello, it would say hello right there. Okay. Then we have down here our body section. That's where the stuff is that goes on the page. All right? And then we've got our ending tag. Now, again, I don't expect you to remember all that, but I've just very quickly wanted to show it to you, and they explain a lot of it here, too. All right? And you're going to learn over time how to do all this. If you're not aware of this, if you haven't seen the book, haven't bought the book, whatever, the way these books work from this publisher is typically, they're called double page books, where on the left-hand side, they've got a bunch of text. On the right-hand side, they've got pictures that show what that text is about, or code snippets, or whatever. I spend the majority of the time lecturing in here on the pages that are on the right. I figured the stuff that's on the left, I'm not going to read to you. You all know how to read. All right? So, once we put that in, we start writing the CSS. All right? And the CSS is what we use to, if you look up here, this links our CSS file to our HTML file. You say, I don't know what that means. You're going to do it in a couple days. You'll understand it. This is what we want the CSS to do. This says, for our entire body of our document, we want you to use Arial font. If Arial font is not available, try to use Helvetica font. If that's not available, use any sans serif font you've got on your screen. And this is other stuff. And again, don't worry about it right now because we're going to be doing it. If I wanted an H1 tag, for example, notice in here, all H1 tags, and we're going to write those tomorrow already, will automatically be navy in color. So when you put in all this, it ends up, you can see how that's blue, the font is different, etc. So as I mentioned before, HTML is the content, CSS is the aesthetics. All right, it's how to take that content and make it look the way you want it to look. All right. And they give you some history of the standards. You can read that stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. But again, notice 2013, so I guess 7 years. But really, it hasn't changed much between HTML5 and HTML5.1. So that's 12 years old. What happened, and I'll say this once and it'll be it. People used HTML for years. And then they said, you know what? This language stinks. So they decided they were going to replace it. And they made a new language that still used somewhat that was called XML. And XML is the extensible markup language. The difference between HTML and XML, with HTML you've got between 100 and 125 code of these different tags that all have exact meanings. With XML you made your own tags. It was kind of neat because you could make whatever it is you wanted to have. And if you look out there, there's thousands of varieties of XML. There's XML for people who play chess. There's XML for music. There's XML for chemistry. But then after a while it got too confusing and people said, you know what, I don't think that HTML is all that bad. So they came back again and they brought it back, but they decided to make it better. All right, and that's what happened with HTML 5.0. So when you look, here was December 1999, and it wasn't until almost 9 or 10 years later that it really came back. All right, and the same thing with CSS. Now the funny thing is they talk about these standards. All right, there are governing bodies that say you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. They're governing bodies, but unlike governing bodies we have, where if you don't do it, they could probably, if I start driving on the left-hand side of the road, I'll probably sooner or later either get into an accident or get arrested. All right? But with these standards, they're recommendations. And the browsers can say, well, we're not going to follow that. And that's what Microsoft did for years. They decided to follow their own path, and the way they did things wasn't really the way that other companies did things. I'm not saying that to belittle Microsoft. They just went down their own route. Today, basically, when places like the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, when they come up with standards, they're just adopted right away by the different browsers because it's the right thing to do. Right? And their CSS is the same kind of way. So again, if you want more, they've got, you can go out to their website. It's very dry reading. All right, but it's very good reading in that it really shows you exactly what was done and how it was done. All right, so they go through text editors in here. They use brackets, like I said. We're not. We're going to be using Visual Studio Code. If you read through this, and if you think, I kind of like that bracket, then use that. All right, I'm not going to, but if you say to me, how do you do this in brackets? I'm going to tell you to go look at the help. Because I'm not going to remember how you do it. And I taught for a semester with brackets, but it's like out of sight, out of mind type of thing. All right. All right. What we're using, it isn't exactly an IDE. An IDE is an integrated development environment. We have kind of something that's between an editor and an IDE. All right. And I don't mean to lean on her, but like with Angie, she'll tell you that a lot of the stuff we did in the C# class last semester was automated. There was IntelliSense, there was stuff built into the system that when you started to do something, a lot of times it would figure out what you wanted to do, and you just have to hit the tab key or whatever. You get some of that in here in Visual Studio Code, but not as much as you get in regular Visual Studio that we'll use next semester. All right. One thing, you don't have to download this now. I'm telling you something. You don't have to download this now. But eventually, if you don't have it on your machine already, you're going to want to do download what's called FileZilla. You don't have to do it now. You won't have to do it for quite a while. All right. And it looks like it's at filezilla-product.org. And what it's going to do, every one of you, by the end of the semester, and you'll get the whole last week of the semester to work on it, you have to work on an electronic portfolio that you keep refining throughout your 4 semesters here. All right? And that electronic portfolio, we actually go and put that up on one of Rankin's servers that is out on the St. Louis campus. You can keep it out there forever. I've got students who graduated 3 years ago. Their stuff's still out there. All right? I've got other people who took theirs down. It's up to you. You know, and you'll own it, and I'll show you how you'll be able to get rid of it after you graduate if you don't want it there anymore. All right? But in order to take and copy your stuff from this machine or your machine out to the Rankin server, you'll need a package like FileZilla. All right? So we will use that, not today, but we will use that eventually. And that's an FTP or a file transfer protocol type of program. This is what it'll look like. In fact, it looks just like this. You will put in right here for the host, iwt.rankin.edu. Your username, unless somebody, like if you're John Smith and there already is a J Smith out there, you might be J Smith too. All right, but Angie, I believe you're A Shelton, for example, something like that. You'll make up well, I'll give you a password. All right, and for the port, you'll type in 21, then you'll see something like this. You notice the screen is split in half. This is your desktop. This will be the Rankin server. So if I want to take this folder and move it from the desktop or copy it to the Rankin server, I click on it, hold down on the left mouse button, drag and drop it right here. That's all there is to it. All right? I mean, again, a lot of the stuff that you do here, as the saying goes, it's not rocket science. All right? How to view a web page. I showed you this before. You may or may not have noticed. But for instance, if I go out just to rankin.edu. All right, so there I am. And I take my mouse and I go into a blank area here and I right mouse click with my mouse. I might have to do it over here. Yep, and I choose View Page Source. This is all the HTML and CSS and JavaScript code that makes up the web page for Rankin. All right, that's a view source. And the stuff that we'll be doing at first, you know, it's the old saying that tomorrow we're going to go into the wading pool. All right, my dad always tells me that, or told me, he's not here anymore, but he said the way he learned how to swim was his father took him out in the middle of the lake and pushed him in. I don't believe that, but then again, knowing my grandfather as I did, he may have done that. All right, I don't know. But the point is, you're going into the kiddie pool. All right, then we're going to go into the shallow end, and eventually you'll be diving off into the deep end. All right, they explain the different components here of a URL. HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is the protocol. Really, the protocol is HTTP:// or HTTPS://. Then you've got the domain name. All right? Then you've got the path. If you don't put in a path or a file name, it defaults and it's looking for a file called index.html by default. We'll get into that stuff too very, very quickly. I just showed you how to do the view source. 5 critical web development issues, because we're almost done here. Users and usability. All right. The old saying used to be, you know, when you create something, make it for a kid. Because if a kid can understand it, an adult can. Well, I'll tell you, it's almost the opposite of that when you are working with web stuff. All right. Why? What do I mean? For example, kids like colors. Kids like pictures. Older adults, they don't particularly like pictures. They like a lot of text. All right? So you should always know who your audience is. If I was making a gaming website, I probably would strive to not have a lot of text. If I was making a website on how to fill out your taxes, I'd probably have a lot of text. All right? So again, that's the users, and you want to make it usable. All right? And, you know, it says 4 guidelines for improving usability. You may or may not have heard of this, but the old saying is if you had a newspaper and you folded it in half, everything on the upper half is what's above the fold. So you try to put your most important stuff near the top of the page. All right, group related stuff together, all this stuff we're going to be going through. We want to build websites that are usable. And as it says, it refers to how easy it is to use a website. It's critical for an effective website. I have seen really, really good looking websites that are set up really poorly and they fall by the wayside. I see a lot of other websites, a lot of these technical ones that you go to, you look at it, you're like, oh my God, that is really ugly. But it's been out there forever, and they're not going to change it because they don't have to. All right? And if you say, oh, I'd really like to know more about that. There's a guy who's made a living. He puts out books, and he's got a website, websitesthatsuck.com. Not my words. And he literally has he makes books out of this. Really a pretty ingenious idea when you think about it. I'd like to be able to go on the web, look at people's sites, rate them, and get paid for doing that. He's like the Guy Fieri of websites. You know, the guy on diners, drive-ins, and whatever the heck it is. You know, I always tell my wife, if somebody paid me to go to places and eat, I'd be happy. All right. Cross-browser compatibility. This isn't as big an issue anymore, but it used to be if you brought up a web page, for example, in Internet Explorer, and then you brought it up in Firefox, they looked radically different. All right, not as bad today, but there still can be differences. So you want cross-browser compatibility. You want it to look the same as much as possible in any and every browser. This is, notice this. These are the current browsers. All right, and again, this is a couple years old, so it's older than that. You can go online and you can find out for all these statistics, the percentage of people using IE as opposed to Firefox, as opposed to Chrome, etc. All that stuff is out there. All right. Accessibility, it's a really big thing today. The more public your website is, the more you have to create a website that anyone and everyone can use. That means blind people, deaf people, etc. It's the old joke, because somebody said that to me once. We were talking about that, and I was helping somebody with a website, and I mentioned this to them, and they said, geez, I never thought about blind people. And I said, you're selling something. You want them to buy it? He's like, I wouldn't have any idea if the person buying my product is blind or not. I said, right. So you want to make it accessible for them if it's a product that anyone can use. And they'll give you guidelines in here. And there's things like ADA, the American Disabilities Act, etc. And there's a bunch of other things that you can go look at also. SEO. SE is the search engine. All right, you all know the biggest search. What's the biggest search engine in the world? Yeah. There's things like, I remember when they came out, I think there still is, like Ask Jeeves, Yahoo, Bing. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. I mean, there's at least 10 of them, if you went out and looked. All right. But Google is probably the best known one. It's at least the best known one that I've ever heard. All right. Responsive, I've already talked about, but again, there's the idea. Not only do you want it to look the same on every medium, but notice there it is, portrait, there it is, landscape. That kind of an idea. There are different ways of doing this. We're going to learn how to hard code ways in to make that happen. And then we'll go into Bootstrap, where stuff is automatically responsive without you having to do much of anything. All right? And that's pretty much it. All right? Any questions on anything that I went over? Because tomorrow when you come in here, this is what we're going to do. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to give you all a copy of the test for Chapter 1. All right? In fact, maybe Chapters 1 and 2, we'll just do them as a class. We won't do all 16. I'm not that nice a person. But we'll do the one for Chapter 1 as a class. And I won't call on people. Sometimes people don't mind being called on. Sometimes they like being called on. But I'll say, what do you think number 1 is? All right, we'll just go around the room. And we'll do that. That should take no more than 15 minutes to a half an hour at the most. Then I'm going to go over Chapter 2. Then we're going to go in and actually start writing some of the stuff. All right, because again, that's how you're going to learn. All right. So normally, one thing about ranking, if just in case you didn't know this, and I think Angie will attest to this, if your class lasts till 11:55, guess when I'm supposed to let you out? 11:55. All right. But I'm not going to keep you here for 12 minutes when there's really not much to do. So you can take off for today. If you have the book, please try to look at chapters 1 and 2 for tomorrow. All right? I'll see you then.